I think my married neighbor is sneaking out every Wednesday to meet another man. Don't look away from this video because what I discovered will surprise you in ways you never imagined. My dear, if you're here, it's because you enjoy good gossip, just like me. Every day on this channel, we bring you a new story or gossip that I, Ruth, see behind the scenes here in my neighborhood. And today, wow, today I have a story that will move you. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel to be notified every time we post a new gossip story, and leave a comment telling us what you think will happen. And please, don't leave the video, because the ending of this story is absolutely surprising. I always like to give you a special message. I've pinned some incredible natural products in the first comment that can revolutionize your health. I use them and wholeheartedly recommend them. They're products for insomnia, joint pain, diabetes, weight loss, and much more. Just click the pinned link in the comments. You'll be supporting the channel and taking care of your health at the same time. Now let's get to our story today. My dear, let me tell you about Jennifer, my neighbor. Jennifer is a 42-year-old woman with perfectly groomed blonde hair, the kind of person you look at and think, what a perfect life. She lives in the light blue house right across from mine with her husband, Tom, a hard-working man who leaves early and returns late in the afternoon. For 3 years living here on this street, I've observed this family. Jennifer has always been a devoted wife, you know? The kind you see watering the plants in the garden in the morning, waving when you drive by, always going to the supermarket at the same time. A routine you could time. But about 4 months ago, something changed. And when I say changed, dear, I mean it. At first, it was just little things, you know? Those details that only an observant neighbor like me can notice. The first thing that caught my attention was one Wednesday morning. I was here at my window as usual. Let's be clear. I'm not spying on anyone. I'm just observing the neighborhood. And I saw Jennifer in the garden. Only there was something different about her. She was more tense. It wasn't her usual calm self. Then, around 2 in the afternoon, I saw something that deeply intrigued me. Jennifer came out of the house, but it wasn't her usual Jennifer. She looked around as if checking if anyone was watching her. She got in her car, something she rarely did at that time, and left. What caught my attention most was the way she was dressed. Jennifer was always elegant, but that day there was something different. It was as if she'd gotten ready for something special, you know? And even stranger, she only returned around 6 o'clock, well before Tom got home from work. At first I thought, Ruth, you're seeing things that aren't there. But the following Wednesday, the same thing happened. And the next Wednesday too. And the next. My dear, for 3 consecutive weeks, every Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon, Jennifer left the house in a completely different way from her usual behavior. And most intriguingly, she always returned with an expression on her face that I couldn't decipher. It was a mixture of relief and sadness. I can't quite explain it. But wait, because the story gets even more interesting. One afternoon, I was here watering my plants on the porch, because we have to take care of our own house too, right? When I heard Tom asking Jennifer where she'd gone that afternoon. And do you know what she said? She said she'd gone to meet a friend for coffee. Lie, my dear. Blatant lie. How can I be so sure? Because I saw Jennifer leaving and coming back, and there was nothing casual about her meeting with a friend. Her expression, her nervous demeanor, her rush to get there before her husband. That wasn't the behavior of someone going for coffee. I started paying more attention. The following Wednesday, I strategically positioned myself in my living room, where I had a perfect view of the street. At 2 o'clock sharp, there was Jennifer again. But this time, I paid attention to every detail. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. A modest but pretty dress. She'd put on lipstick, something she rarely did when going out during the day. And most revealing of all, she checked her phone at least 3 times before leaving the house. Guys, these are all the classic signs of a woman about to meet someone, don't you think? Plus, she was clearly nervous. The kind of nervousness that comes before doing something you know you shouldn't be doing. When she returned that day, it was even stranger. Jennifer stood in the car for about 5 minutes before getting out. I saw her looking at herself in the rearview mirror, fixing her hair, as if composing herself. And when she finally got out of the car, she walked to the front door in a different way, slower, more thoughtful. But what really convinced me that something was seriously wrong was what I witnessed the following week. It was a Thursday, not a Wednesday. Jennifer was in the garden when her cell phone rang. She answered quickly, and even from a distance I could tell she was very upset by the call. She spoke softly, looking around, and then ran into the house. A few minutes later, she hurried off in the car. The next day, Friday, she looked haggard. She hadn't left the house all day, and when Tom came home from work, she was in the kitchen, but with a completely different expression than usual. You know what intrigued me most? The time. Always at 2 in the afternoon. Always on Wednesdays. This was no coincidence, my dear. This was a scheduled appointment. An appointment she couldn't miss. And worst of all, an appointment she was hiding from her own husband. I began to notice other details. Jennifer began receiving more frequent calls. She always answered quickly, spoke softly, and ended conversations when she noticed someone nearby. One time I saw Tom coming home early, and Jennifer quickly hung up on a seemingly important call. And there's one more thing that made me even more suspicious. Jennifer started leaving the house on other days of the week, too, but always with that same nervous expression. Sometimes it was on a Tuesday, sometimes to a farm, but Wednesdays at 2 p.m. were sacred. She never missed that appointment. On one of those extra outings, I saw her coming home, and she was clearly emotional. Not just happy, you know. It was like she'd been crying or been through something really intense. She stayed in the car for a long time before going inside, and when she finally got out, she was wiping her eyes. Guys, imagine my mind at that moment. A neighbor I'd always admired, who always seemed to have a solid marriage, suddenly started acting completely strange, sneaking out, lying to her husband, receiving mysterious calls, coming home emotional. And poor Tom didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he was pretending not to. He continued his normal routine, leaving for work in the morning, returning late in the afternoon, tending the garden on the weekends, as if nothing was happening. But I could tell there was something in the air. You know that tension you feel when you're around a couple who's going through problems? That's exactly what I felt every time I saw Jennifer and Tom together. They talked, yes, but there was a distance there that hadn't existed before. One morning I witnessed a scene that made me even more worried. Jennifer was in the garden watering the plants when Tom left for work. They said their goodbyes normally, but after Tom left, Jennifer stood there, hose in hand, staring into space, for more than 10 minutes, as if lost in deep thought. In 2 minutes, you'll understand how all these details connect in a way I never imagined. Because what I thought I knew about Jennifer was completely wrong. Completely. After that morning, I decided I needed to understand what was going on. Not out of malicious curiosity, my dear, but because Jennifer had always been a good neighbor, and I was genuinely concerned. If she was having trouble, maybe I could help in some way. The following Wednesday, I prepared to observe even more closely. At 2 in the afternoon, Like clockwork, Jennifer left the house. But this time, something was different. She seemed more determined, less nervous, as if she'd made an important decision. She was wearing a simple white blouse and dark jeans. Nothing fancy, but she'd clearly dressed up. Her hair was perfect, her makeup subtle but present. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't look around before leaving. She just got in her car and drove away. That day she took longer to return. She usually returned around 5:30 or 6 o'clock. But that Wednesday, she didn't arrive home until 7 o'clock, almost at the same time as Tom. I saw her hurrying in, and for the first time, Tom seemed to notice something was different. They talked in the garage for a few minutes. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but from their body language, it seemed like a serious conversation. Jennifer was gesturing more than usual, and Tom had a worried expression I'd never seen before. That night, the lights in their house stayed on until very late. It was as if they were having a long, important conversation. And the next day, Thursday, Jennifer didn't leave the house. She stayed inside all day, and when Tom came home from work, he arrived earlier than usual. That's when I began to wonder if I was witnessing the end of a marriage, if Jennifer was finally telling the truth about her secret trysts, if Tom was finding out about the betrayal I suspected was happening. But my dear, life is much more complex than we imagine, and what I was about to discover about Jennifer would completely change my perspective on snap judgments and the quiet courage some people possess. Because sometimes when we think we know the whole story, we discover we didn't know half of it. And in Jennifer's case, what I thought was a lie and a betrayal was actually something much deeper and more painful than I could have ever imagined. The week after that serious conversation between Jennifer and Tom, I was more intrigued than ever. Don't look away from this video because what I discovered will completely surprise you. There was something going on in that house that went far beyond what I imagined, and my curiosity was at its peak. The next Wednesday arrived, and I was practically glued to the window, waiting to see if Jennifer would keep up her mysterious routine. 2 o'clock was approaching, and I could feel my anxiety rising. Would she continue her secret meetings after that conversation with Tom? At exactly 2 o'clock, Jennifer left the house. But this time, my dear, there was something completely different about her. She wasn't just nervous like the other times. She seemed fragile. It was as if carrying that secret was weighing too heavily on her shoulders. She was wearing a long coat, even though it was a relatively warm day. And for the first time, I noticed she was thinner. How had I not noticed this before? Jennifer had always been an average-sized woman, but now she seemed smaller, more fragile, as if something was eating her up inside. When she returned that afternoon, it was the first time I saw her clearly crying. She was in the car for almost 15 minutes, and even from a distance I could see her repeatedly wiping her face with a tissue. My heart sank watching that scene, because whatever she was doing, it was obvious she was in a lot of pain. That night, Tom came home with flowers. Flowers? On a normal weekday? This confused me even more. If he knew about the affair, would he be bringing flowers? Or was it a desperate attempt to save the marriage? Our minds race when we see these things, don't they? Over the next few days, I began to observe Jennifer more closely, and that's when I noticed things that worried me even more. She had developed a habit of frequently putting her hand to her forehead, as if she had a constant headache. And several times I saw her standing in the middle of the garden, as if she'd lost track of what she was doing. One Monday morning, I witnessed a scene that left a deep impression on me. Jennifer was taking clothes off the clothesline when she suddenly stopped, grabbed the line and stood there, motionless, for several minutes. Then she walked very slowly into the house as if each step was an effort. It was obvious something was very wrong, but I was still convinced it was related to an extramarital affair that was destroying her emotionally. Maybe she'd gotten involved with someone and now regretted it. Maybe the guy was pressuring her in some way. My mind conjured up 1,000 different scenarios. On Tuesday, something happened that further heightened my suspicions. Jennifer received a call in the morning, and after answering, rushed home. A few minutes later, she hurried out in her car. It wasn't Wednesday. It wasn't her usual time, but something urgent had happened. She didn't return until late in the afternoon, and when she arrived, Tom was already home. I saw them talking in the garage again, and this time the conversation seemed even more serious than before. Tom was gesturing more, seeming to be questioning something, and Jennifer had that posture of someone being confronted. That night, their house was completely silent. No lights were on except in their bedroom, and even then they went out earlier than usual. It was as if they'd had a serious argument and each had gone their separate ways. The following Wednesday, something completely changed in the dynamic. Jennifer left at her usual time, 2 in the afternoon, but Tom didn't go to work. I saw him leaving the house about half an hour after Jennifer, driving in the same direction she had gone. Guys, can you imagine what went through my mind at that moment? Tom was following his wife. He'd discovered something and decided to investigate on his own. That was confirmation that my instincts were correct. There was indeed an extramarital affair going on. They returned home at the same time, but in separate cars. Jennifer arrived first, and when Tom arrived a few minutes later, they didn't even speak. They each entered through a different door. The atmosphere between them was tense. But wait, things get even more intriguing. On Thursday, Jennifer didn't leave the house all day, and it wasn't a normal Thursday where she stayed home doing chores. She simply disappeared. The curtains were closed all day, and I saw no movement. When Tom arrived home from work that day, he stood outside the house for a long time before going in, as if he were psychologically preparing himself for something. And when he finally entered a few minutes later, I saw the living room lights come on and noticed figures moving around agitatedly. That night, something happened that left me extremely worried. Around 10 o'clock at night, I saw Tom leaving the house alone, driving at high speed. He didn't return until the next morning, and when he arrived, he was carrying pharmacy bags. Drugstore bags, my dear. This set off a red flag in my mind. Had Jennifer tried something against herself? Was the guilt of the affair consuming her to the point where she'd done something stupid? My heart was racing, thinking of the possibilities. On Friday, for the first time in weeks, I saw Jennifer in the garden, but she looked completely different. She wore a headscarf, something she'd never done before, and she moved much more slowly and carefully. It was as if she were recovering from something. Tom didn't go to work that Friday. He stayed home all day, and I saw him in the garden talking to Jennifer several times. But these weren't tense conversations like the ones I'd witnessed before. They seemed loving, supportive, as if they'd reached some kind of resolution. Over the weekend, they received several visitors. People I'd never seen before arrived with flowers, food, and gifts. It was like a celebration of something, but the atmosphere wasn't exactly festive. It was more like support, as if people were there to provide emotional support. That's when I began to question whether my theory about the affair was correct. Those visits didn't seem like people judging Jennifer for cheating. They seemed like people were there to support her through a difficult situation. The following Monday, I decided I needed to find out the truth, once and for all. I couldn't live with that uncertainty any longer, seeing my neighbor clearly suffering and not knowing how to help. If she were being blackmailed by a lover, perhaps I could intervene somehow. If she was going through a marital crisis, perhaps I could offer a friendly shoulder. The next Wednesday would be decisive. I had made a decision I never thought I would make. I was going to follow Jennifer to find out where the hell she went every Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon. I know it may seem invasive, but you have to understand that Jennifer has always been more than just a neighbor to me. She was always kind, always waved when we saw each other, always seemed like a good person. To watch her waste away like that and do nothing would be remiss of me. On Tuesday, I prepared like a private detective. I packed modest clothes, sunglasses, and even a cap I'd stashed in my closet. I positioned my car so I could leave quickly without Jennifer noticing. I was following her. Wednesday arrived, and my heart was pounding like it was about to burst out of my chest. It was approaching 2 p.m, and I was in the car, pretending to just organize a few things, but actually waiting for Jennifer to leave. At 2 o'clock sharp, there she was. She emerged from the house wearing a light-colored coat and sunglasses, got into her car, and drove off. I waited a few seconds and then began following her, always keeping a safe distance. My dear, let me tell you that following someone in real life is much harder than it looks in the movies. I was sweating, afraid of being discovered, afraid of losing her in traffic, afraid of causing an accident, because I was more focused on her car than the road. Jennifer drove for about 20 minutes through the city. She passed through neighborhoods I knew, others not so much. She didn't seem to be heading anywhere romantic or suspicious. In fact, she was heading more toward the city center, a more commercial area. At one point, she stopped at a traffic light, and I was behind her, just 2 cars away. I could see her clearly in her rearview mirror, and what I saw intrigued me even more. Jennifer was looking at herself in the mirror, but not in a vain way. It was as if she was mentally preparing herself for something, taking deep breaths, concentrating. When the light changed, she continued down the main avenue until she reached an area I immediately recognized. It was the city's medical district. My heart skipped a beat. Why would Jennifer be going to the medical district every Wednesday? My mind went into overdrive. Medical district, secret meetings, lies to her husband. Was she getting some kind of cosmetic procedure done in secret? Botox, fillers, some kind of plastic surgery she didn't want Tom to know about? This would make sense given her behavior. Women sometimes undergo these procedures in secret, especially if their husbands are against it or if they're insecure about their age. And it would explain the lies, the nervousness, even why she's been more fragile lately. Cosmetic procedures can be emotionally difficult. But then Jennifer did something that shattered my theory. Instead of stopping at some beauty clinic or plastic surgery office, she drove straight to the city's main hospital, the big public hospital where people go for serious things. I felt my stomach churn. A hospital wasn't the place for routine cosmetic procedures. A hospital was the place for serious things. Things that might explain why Jennifer was losing weight, why she looked so frail, why Tom was so worried. Jennifer parked in the hospital parking lot, and I pulled into a space farther away, where I could still observe her. She sat in the car for a few minutes, just like she did when she drove home. Those moments of mental preparation I'd observed so many times. When she finally got out of the car, I could clearly see her walking toward the hospital's main entrance. And that's when I noticed something that made me question everything I'd thought up until that moment. Jennifer wasn't walking like someone going to a clandestine rendezvous. She wasn't walking like someone going for a cosmetic procedure. She was walking like someone heading towards something difficult, something that requires all her courage. And what's more, she wasn't alone. At the hospital entrance, a woman about her age approached her. They greeted each other with a long hug, the kind you give someone going through a difficult time. And together, they entered the hospital. I stood there in the parking lot for over 2 hours, waiting to see Jennifer emerge. And when she finally appeared, she was accompanied not only by the same woman, but by 2 other people. They all seemed to be offering her emotional support. Jennifer looked exhausted, more exhausted than I'd ever seen her. She walked slowly, as if she'd been through something very exhausting. The people around her treated her with special care, as if she were very fragile. It was in that moment, watching Jennifer walk out of the hospital, surrounded by people who clearly cared about her, that I began to understand that I had it all wrong, completely wrong. There was no extramarital affair. There was no cheating. There were no lies for base reasons. Jennifer was hiding something from her husband, yes, but it wasn't what I imagined. It was something much more serious, much more frightening, much more painful. I followed Jennifer back home, but this time with a heavy heart for a completely different reason. It wasn't curiosity about a possible betrayal anymore. It was genuine concern for a neighbor who was clearly facing something terrible and doing it alone to protect the people she loved. When we arrived back in the neighborhood, Jennifer went inside, and I sat in my car for a few more minutes, trying to process everything I'd seen. The hospital, the people offering support, her fragile state. Everything pointed in a direction I didn't even want to consider. But in a few minutes, you'll discover the full truth about what Jennifer was hiding. And I guarantee that when you find out, you'll understand why she chose to lie to her husband rather than tell the truth. Because sometimes lying is an act of love, not betrayal. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on what Jennifer was doing at the hospital every Wednesday. I want to know if you can imagine the truth before I tell you. And please give the video a like. It really helps the channel grow. And since we're talking about health, don't forget to check out those natural products I pinned in the first comment, especially now that you'll understand the importance of taking good care of your health before it's too late. In the next part of this story, I'll tell you exactly what happened when I finally learned the whole truth about Jennifer. And get your tissues ready, because this story will move you in ways you can't even imagine. Tom arrived home that afternoon, and for the first time in weeks, I saw them hugging in the garden. A long, tight hug, the kind that speaks 1,000 words. And it was at that moment that I realized my judgment of them was completely wrong. After that afternoon at the hospital, I couldn't get Jennifer out of my head. I spent the whole night wondering what could be happening to her. And the next morning, a Thursday, something happened that confirmed all my new suspicions. Around 9 in the morning, I saw an unfamiliar car pull up in front of Jennifer's house. 2 women got out, one carrying a bag that looked like it contained home-cooked food. They stayed in the house for over 2 hours, and when they left, Jennifer went to the door to say goodbye. Even from a distance, I could see that Jennifer was emotional. It wasn't the nervous emotion I'd observed before. It was gratitude. It was as if these women had done something very special for her. For the rest of the week, I noticed more visitors arriving. Always women, always bringing something. Food, flowers, small gifts, and most importantly, they all treated Jennifer with special affection, as if she was someone very dear to them going through a difficult time. Tom also changed his behavior. He started coming home from work early, always bringing Jennifer something. Sometimes it was flowers, sometimes it was ice cream, sometimes it was just a long hug at the door. It was obvious he knew something and was being as loving as possible. The following Wednesday, I was determined to find out more details. I wouldn't follow Jennifer again. That would be too invasive, but I would pay attention to any signs I could observe around my house. Jennifer left at her usual time, but this time Tom didn't go to work. He stayed home, and all afternoon, I saw him cleaning the house, preparing what looked like a special dinner, and arranging flowers in vases. It was as if he were preparing some surprise for her return. When Jennifer returned that afternoon, she looked even more frail than the previous time. Tom greeted her at the door with a hug that lasted over a minute. They stood there, embracing in the entryway, and even from a distance, it was clear it was a deeply intimate and emotional moment. That night they received more visitors, but this time it wasn't just women. Couples, entire families, people of all ages arrived. Everyone brought food. Everyone hugged Jennifer warmly. It was like a support group. It was by observing this meeting that I finally understood Jennifer's secret. It wasn't cheating. It wasn't an affair. Jennifer was sick, very sick, and all these people were there to support her and Tom. It all started to make sense. The weekly hospital appointments were treatment sessions. The weight loss, the frailty, the constant fatigue, all were side effects of some serious medical treatment. the lies to Tom. She'd probably only recently discovered them and was still trying to find the courage to tell him. But the next morning, Thursday, something happened that changed everything again. Tom left the house very early, earlier than usual, and Jennifer didn't appear in the garden as usual. The house was completely silent until around 10 in the morning. That's when I saw Tom returning, but not alone. He was accompanied by an older woman, whom I recognized as his mother, and right behind them, another car arrived, with what appeared to be siblings or close family members. Tom's entire family was gathering at their house. This only happens on 2 occasions, very important celebrations or very difficult times. And from the mood I'd been observing for weeks, it definitely wasn't a celebration. Throughout that day, Jennifer's house received constant visitors, family, friends, and close neighbors. Everyone arrived with a serious expression and left clearly emotional. It was as if Jennifer were telling her situation to each person close to her, one by one. Late Thursday afternoon, I witnessed a scene that broke my heart. Jennifer walked out into the garden, leaning on Tom's arm. She was wearing a colorful headscarf and comfortable clothes. They walked slowly to the swing in the garden and sat there, holding hands, just watching the sunset. It was at that moment that it completely sank in. Jennifer was battling cancer. All that strange behavior, the lies, the secret meetings, it all made sense now. She was undergoing chemotherapy and trying to hide it from her husband so as not to worry him. But why hide something so serious? Why not tell Tom from the start? Over the next few days, observing the dynamic between them, I began to understand the answer to that question. Tom is an extremely protective man. Jennifer probably knew her husband well enough to know that if he'd learned about her cancer from the very first moment, he'd have completely panicked. He'd quit his job to care for her, become emotionally deranged, and make the situation even more difficult for both of them. Jennifer, with the wisdom only women possess, decided to face the first moments alone. She underwent the tests, began treatment, understood the gravity of the situation, and only then involved Tom, once she knew exactly what they were dealing with. On Friday, I saw an ambulance pull up in front of their house. My heart raced with fear, but I quickly realized it wasn't an emergency. It was a private ambulance, the kind that transports patients for special treatments. Jennifer walked out of the house leaning on Tom, and they got into the ambulance together. They were gone for almost the entire day. When they returned, Tom carried Jennifer from the ambulance to the front door. She looked exhausted, but she was smiling. Smiling! Even through it all, she still managed to smile at her husband. Over the weekend, their home became a support center. People arrived constantly, bringing home-cooked meals, helping with cleaning, and offering any support Jennifer and Tom needed. It was beautiful to see a community rally around someone struggling. On Monday, I witnessed a conversation between Jennifer and a nearby neighbor that shed a lot of light on things for me. They were in the garden, and since they were closer to my fence, I was able to hear some of it. Jennifer was explaining that she had been diagnosed with cancer about 4 months ago, just as I started noticing changes in her behavior. She said she decided to do a few rounds of chemotherapy, alone first, to better understand the prognosis before involving Tom fully. I needed to know if this was something I could overcome before I destroyed his life with worry, I heard Jennifer say. Tom already lost his mother to cancer 5 years ago. If I told him from day one, he would have been in total despair. My dear, when I heard those words, I started crying right there at my window. Jennifer wasn't being selfish or lying. She was being the most loving wife ever. She was protecting her husband the way she thought best. The neighbor asked how Tom reacted when he finally learned the truth, and Jennifer said something that struck me deeply. He was angry at first, of course. He said I shouldn't have gone through this alone. But then he understood that I did it out of love, and now we're facing it together. Over the next week, I watched as the dynamic in their home completely changed. Tom actually took time off work to care for Jennifer. They set up a hammock in the garden where she could relax outdoors. They transformed the living room into a more comfortable space for those more difficult days, and the visits continued. Every day, different people arrived offering help. Some brought food, others offered to go shopping, others simply came to talk and offer emotional support. It was a network of caring I had never seen before. The following Wednesday, Jennifer didn't leave for the hospital. Instead, a nurse came to their home. Apparently, the treatment had progressed to a stage where she could receive some care at home. Tom stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand throughout the procedure. Watching it all, I felt like a complete idiot. For weeks, I judged Jennifer, concocted theories about cheating, and thought horrible things about a woman who was simply fighting for her life in the bravest way possible. Jennifer wasn't cheating on Tom. She was protecting him. She wasn't lying for ulterior motives. She was lying for love. Those mysterious outings weren't clandestine trysts. They were chemotherapy sessions she endured alone so she could return home and remain strong for her husband. And Tom wasn't being cheated on. He was being loved by a woman who would rather bear the weight of a serious illness alone than cause him unnecessary suffering. When he finally learned the truth, he didn't leave Jennifer alone for a second. In the weeks that followed, I followed their journey with a completely different heart. It was no longer curiosity or suspicion. It was pure admiration for a couple who were facing one of life's most difficult situations with such love and complicity. Jennifer had good days and bad days. On good days, she could spend time in the garden chatting with visitors and even cooking a few meals. On bad days, Tom took care of everything, from bringing her breakfast in bed to carrying her when she was too weak to walk. 3 months after I discovered the truth, I witnessed a scene I'll never forget. It was a Saturday morning, and Jennifer walked out into the garden without her headscarf. Her hair was growing back, still short and patchy, but growing. She sat down on the garden swing and began to cry. But it wasn't tears of sadness. It was tears of relief, of gratitude, of someone who had won a very difficult battle. Tom came over, sat beside her, and they stayed there, holding each other for a long time. That afternoon, they received more visitors than usual. But this time, the mood was different. It was celebratory. Jennifer had completed her treatment, and the doctors were optimistic about her recovery. The entire house was filled with laughter, hugs, and toasts of soda. It was while observing that celebration that I understood the most important lesson Jennifer had taught me, without even knowing it. Sometimes what seems like a lie is actually the greatest proof of love. Sometimes, temporarily hiding the truth is protecting the one you love from unnecessary suffering. Jennifer wasn't a coward in hiding her cancer from Tom at first. She was brave enough to face the disease alone until she knew exactly how to tell him. Brave enough to carry that weight to protect the man she loved. And Tom showed that true love doesn't judge. When he learned the truth, he wasn't angry because Jennifer had lied. He was angry because she had gone through it alone. And from the moment he found out, he devoted himself completely to caring for her. Today, 6 months later, Jennifer and Tom are an even closer couple. She's back tending the garden, and he's back to work, but with more flexible hours. They've set up comfortable chairs in the garden where they spend every afternoon chatting and planning for the future. And me, I've learned that judging people based solely on what we see on the outside is a great injustice. Jennifer taught me that appearances don't always reveal the truth. That sometimes, behind seemingly suspicious behavior, there's a story of courage, love, and protection. How often in life do we judge someone without knowing their whole story? How often do we form theories about people based solely on superficial observations? Jennifer's story made me reflect deeply on this. My dear, I hope this story touched you as much as it did me. If you've made it this far, leave a comment telling me what you thought of this twist. I bet you thought it was cheating at first, just like I did. And if you like this story, subscribe to the channel to be notified whenever I bring you new gossip or anecdotes from my neighborhood. Believe me, There's always something interesting happening on this street, and I'm always here watching it all from my window. Give this video a like too. It really helps YouTube's algorithm show our stories to more people. And share it with those friends who also enjoy good gossip. I'm sure they'll love this story as much as you do. And before we wrap up, don't forget those natural products I pinned in the first comment. Especially after this story, we see how important it is to take preventive care of our health. Jennifer made me understand that health is the most precious thing we have. Until next time, everyone. And remember, things aren't always what they seem. Sometimes behind a lie lies the greatest act of love anyone can show.